So what does that mean for the world's fastest growing economy and one of the world's biggest, the United States itself? Nick Lardy is a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute in Washington. Nick, we just ran through a number of high-profile headlines that have been ratcheting up tension here between China and the U.S. Give me a sense of how real this is right now.
Well, I think it is potentially a real turning point. I think relations between the two countries got off to a good start early in the Obama administration, but quite frankly, since his trip to China in the fall, things have deteriorated quite rapidly over a fairly broad range of issues, including the ones that you mentioned, also climate change, where China maybe didn't play the role we had hoped that it might. So I think there's a serious question about whether or not the United States and China are going to be able to cooperate on a number of important global issues, given the irritants that have appeared. And I think it's worth noting that China is reacting much more strongly, for example, to arms sales to Taiwan. These have been going on for 3 decades. Visits between presidents of the United States and the Dalai Lama have been routine. But China is really turning up the pressure on these events in a way that we haven't seen before.
Right. It's key what you just said there, because we know President Bush, the previous president here, did sit down with the Dalai Lama. Much was made of it at the time, but it didn't seem to change the tone of the conversation between the U.S. and China. And in terms of this latest arms sale, what, $6.4 billion, that's a commercial transaction. Why so politically loaded? What is changing right now?
Well, there's always sensitivity over the Taiwan question from China's point of view. They consider it a sovereignty question. It's the last part of China they've not recovered. It's an unfinished civil war. And the transactions are not really purely commercial. They are approved by the U.S. government, and yes, they are private transactions, but it takes place in a political framework. And there have not been significant sales in recent years because of, quite frankly, internal bickering in Taiwan, and they couldn't reach agreement on a budget to acquire the arms. Now they've done that, so this sale is going ahead. But these were originally proposed in the Bush administration, but there was a delay in the actual transactions. Now the Chinese are even threatening to put sanctions on the American companies that produce the products that are going to be sold to Taiwan. This is unprecedented if they actually go ahead with it.
Unprecedented, and certainly not insignificant considering the amount of trade between the U.S. and China. I mean, two-way trade's $409 billion. We heard from President Obama today in the remarks he gave on a number of issues, but on the issue of China, he said our future is going to be tied with our ability to sell products. Mentioned China as one of the biggest markets, and to close off would be a mistake. How significant is it that Obama acknowledged that closing off to China would be a mistake?
Well, I think he's trying to head off what he thinks might be coming out of Congress, more draconian legislation directed against China. And he's trying to keep the relationship open. But he's also, I thought, was signaling in his remarks that the currency is going to be, again, an important issue when the next meeting of the Strategic and Economic Dialogue occurs in a few months in Beijing. He didn't mention that specifically, but the body language and the tone was that this is something that's rising on the agenda.
Yeah, and significant timing ahead of the upcoming congressional elections as well.